Hello, everybody. We're getting everybody, letting everybody in right now. And if you are just tuning in, make sure that you're muted, please. The chat box is all yours to use with questions or anything that comes up as we're talking today. One thing that we're hoping that you can do is in the chat box, please share your name, your location, and what you do for work. That would be fantastic. And I said we were going to start promptly at noon. It's going to be a minute or two after. I'm just letting everybody in. We're at just over 100 participants. So exciting. All right. Great to see you all. If you're just joining, please put your name, your location, and what you do for work in the chat box. That would be greatly appreciated. All right. We're starting 2 minutes late. Welcome to our session, everybody. I'm so excited that you're here. I have a great team of people with me today, and we're thrilled to have you join us to learn more about Handle with Care. And I just want to extend a special welcome to those who are already implementing Handle with Care, who are here just to learn more or have a refresh as well. We had over 300 people register for today's session, and that is just amazing. Thank you for tuning in. A few quick reminders. Please stay muted for the session today. Use the chat box as much as you would like for questions or comments. My colleague is monitoring that. And then please, in the chat box, introduce yourself, where you're from, the work you do. This will help give us a sense of who's with us today. And then without further ado, let's quickly review our session agenda. We have a lot of content over the next hour. As you can see, we're going to have a lot of great conversations, but we're going to start by discussing trauma's impact on learning and what we can do, the roles and responsibilities of those key folks involved of Handle with Care. So first responders, our schools, our mental health partners. I'm going to share a snapshot of North Dakota and how Handle with Care is going here. And lastly, some resources and tools that are available to everybody who's working to implement the program. Next, I'm going to take a second just to briefly introduce myself, let you know who I am and why I was excited to host this session with you. My name is Lindsay Burkhardt, and I serve as the Director of Prevention Initiatives here at Families Flourish ND. This session is being recorded, so if at any point someone you know has to hop off or they can't join us live, we'll make sure that this is available to share afterwards. So I stepped into this role in July, and prior to that, I served as the director of the North Dakota Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Task Force for the last 3.5 years until it dissolved. The most important message that I want to share with all of you today is that I have a deep commitment to the Handle with Care program, and I believe in this initiative wholeheartedly, both as a former educator and someone who's worked in victim services and restorative justice. I've seen firsthand the value and impact of this program on children and families. Over the past several years, as an agency, like many other agencies, we've experienced staff changes, and that unintentionally disrupted partnerships, and it left some gaps in the work that we're doing with the Handle with Care program. My goal right now is to rebuild, reignite, and strengthen the Handle with Care initiative across the state of North Dakota. I'm honored to serve as your contact for Handle with Care and to help ensure its success. This session that we're having today, it was designed to do more than just share information. It's about bringing current partners, potential partners, those exploring implementing it together. By aligning our efforts, we can move forward collectively and continue making a powerful impact on the children all across our wonderful state of North Dakota. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to kick off our session by just talking what Handle with Care is. Handle with Care is a simply a powerful strategy designed to create safe and supportive environments for children who have recently been exposed to traumatic events. And what makes it work is first collaboration. From first responders to school staff and mental health providers, they all play a key and vital role in Handle with Care. Later in our session, we'll talk about each of these key elements more in depth. So how does Handle with Care work? It begins with a notification. When first responders encounter a child at a scene of a potentially traumatic event, they send a confidential alert to that child's school. This alert doesn't include details. It's just a message to handle this child with care. Next is intervention. Schools become the primary point of support. Teachers and staff can respond in ways that the child feels support and they feel safe, whether that's by offering flexibility, providing a quiet space, or simply showing extra care and patience. The goal is simple. It's to make sure children exposed to trauma receive timely, appropriate support so they can succeed emotionally and academically. And the one thing I like to talk about is, why does this early intervention matter? What we know is that acting quickly can mean the difference between a child who struggles for months or years and a child who feels understood, supported, and equipped to thrive. The key principle behind Handle with Care is this: we need to minimize negative outcomes from trauma and traumatic events as quickly as possible. And with that, I am so excited. I'm just honored to turn the conversation over to the co-founder of Handle with Care. Thank you for joining us today, Andrea. We're just thrilled to learn from you.
Thanks for having me, Lindsay. I'm so glad I could participate with you right now. I'm down in Charleston, South Carolina, and just did a training this morning for South Carolina, which is doing what you're doing, kicking it off statewide with a lot of people that believe in it. I am one of the co-founders of Handle with Care. I was there in the beginning. This all started with a phone call from a friend of mine. I was always a system-based victim advocate. And a friend of mine was the victim advocate in the federal prosecutor's office, and she called me one day and said, let's come up with our own Defending Childhood initiative. And literally it went from that to this program that's gone all across the country. How could that possibly happen? Because it's good for kids. It doesn't take a lot of energy. It doesn't cost money. It just makes a whole lot of sense. Everyone that does this always says, why weren't we doing this before? This is so simple. This is so needed. So my background is victim assistance, and right now I'm doing Handle with Care nationally, helping all kinds of states with all kinds of issues. And for those of you that are trying to start it, just remember there's always going to be a little bump in the road, but there's always a way around it. Find your passionate people, your champions, and just keep on tending that garden and you'll have a Handle with Care. The next, please. So the problem is trauma, and we all have heard about trauma. But what I want you to understand is no one understood how prevalent trauma was before that ACE study came out. It is prevalent. 1 in 4 children, the National Child Traumatic Stress Network said 1 in 4 children have experienced a traumatic event that can affect their learning and behavior in the classroom. It can lead to lower academic performance, increased absences and drops out, and that's the biggest one. I heard the superintendent where I live in West Virginia say the biggest problem is just getting these kids to school. We want them to feel welcome. We want them to know that they belong, and they need to know we want them to succeed. They do have a lot of behavioral challenges. When children can't read, we teach them to read. When they can't do math, we teach them math. And when they don't know how to act, we punish them. And that's the last thing they need. All behavior is communication. We need to see what's driving that behavior if we're going to be able to help these kids. So without support, these students are often at a greater risk for long-term negative outcomes. Trauma can derail a child's educational path and increase the risk of long-term challenges. We want to intervene quickly so they can succeed. The longer they're in school, the more opportunities they have. Next slide, please. So a study in 2000, there was a big OJJDP study in 2009 that found that 60% of children had been exposed to crime, violence, and abuse in their home, schools, and communities, and 40% had been direct victims of 2 or more violent acts. That's what really kicked off Handle with Care. Along with all the data from the ACE study, the ACE study found that 64% of adults had at least 1 ACE, and 16 or more had 4 or more ACEs. What I want you to look at for purposes of Handle with Care is that last bullet. This is information and data from Kaiser Permanente. ASA can affect students' learning and behavior in the classroom. Children with 3 or more ACEs are 5 times more likely to have attendance issues, 6 times more likely to have behavioral problems, and 3 times more likely to experience academic failure. There's the research on why we need to do this program and why we need to help assist children experiencing trauma. Next slide, please. So what does it look like at school? Trauma looks lots of different ways at school. But the first and foremost, like I said, is just getting those kids to come to school. And when they come to school, often they have inconsistent academic performances. You know, they may do great on a test one day and a week later just bomb a test. They're just all over the place. They have very poor control of their emotions. A child who's experienced trauma is very hypervigilant. You know, if you run into something that really scares you or upsets you, anything that reminds you of that can trigger you to set you off with managing your emotions. Unpredictable and impulsive behavior. They can be very aggressive. They can be very angry. But what is anger? Anger is the language of fear. Sometimes they check out. They can be defiant. They have a hard time with trust issues, a very hard time. So the easiest way to make themselves safe is to make sure they keep you at a distance, and a lot of times that behavior is what you're seeing. Difficulty with relationships. One thing we know that can help them so much is having a supportive relationship with someone, and they tend to have difficulty with that. Next slide, please. So let's give you an example of a handle with care and how it might work. Let's just say it's 2 in the morning and 911 gets a call and law enforcement responds. Maybe one person is arrested, maybe one caregiver is arrested, maybe one caregiver or parent goes to the hospital. What happens to the kids? Maybe they go next door to a neighbor. Maybe they go over to grandma's house. Maybe they have to go into foster care, but what odds are, where are they the next day? The odds are they're at school the next day for the most part. Next slide, please. And what's happening at school when they get there? Well, usually teachers and staff don't have a clue what's going on. And the student comes to school, do they have their homework? Probably not. Are they worried about their mom and dad? I'm sure they are. Did they remember to study for the test? Did they bomb the test? Are they hired, hungry? A lot of times with the little kids, they want to tell you because they don't have the words for what's going on. They just simply say, my belly hurts because something's wrong and they don't know how to explain it to you. Some of them go the opposite way. They try to be completely perfect so they don't draw any attention to themselves or their families. So usually this kind of event is chronic, and teachers and staff who do wonderful work with kids have millions of things going on at one time. When it's this chronic, it's frustrating for the kids and it's frustrating for the staff. And the staff is, thinking to the kid, where's your homework? Why didn't you study for the test? I've been telling you for 2 weeks we're taking this test on this day and you didn't study for it. Why can't you stay awake? Were you up playing video games all night long? Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying all teachers do this. I'm not saying this is the outcome. I'm just saying it's so frustrating for everybody involved. And often we interpret what's going on through a lens because we don't understand what's going on. But this is a very, very common thing for teachers and staff, and that's what's happening at school before Handle with Care. Next slide, please. So if this goes on for extended period of times when protective factors are missing and children face greater risk, they often, they live in chaos at home and they come to school and they feel like they're not welcome and they can't live up to it and they're not doing well. So they get a little bit of stuff at school, they get stuff at home, and they begin to fall behind. They start skipping school, get behind in classes, maybe drop out of school. A lot of times, if you're not in school, you're getting into trouble, into risky business, and often they're involved in the juvenile justice system. So trauma can trigger that descend from trauma to school failure to delinquency to the criminal behavior to getting involved in the criminal justice system. And that's one thing we want to prevent. The best thing we can do for kids is to keep them in school so they can learn as much as they can, so they have more opportunities in life. And so that's what we're trying to do by the Handle with Care program. Next slide, please. So what can we do? How does this Handle with Care program work? Bridging communication between first responders and schools allows educators to support students after traumatic events. In the past, there was no, well, let me back up. First responders, forever, law enforcement are on the scene and they see the children that are most at risk before anybody does. And often they have no tool, they have no mechanism to be able to share this information so they can identify that child for services, for things that they might need. But Handle with Care figured out how to do this without violating anybody's policies and procedures and without violating any confidentiality. So law enforcement can simply send a confidential notice over to the school when they encounter children at the scene, and schools are notified that the child's been exposed to shock trauma and without sharing any details of the event. And I'll say that over and over, no details are shared. It's not anyone's business, the details of what happened. The business of the school is that we want those children to feel safe to learn. So that's why we're sending it over there. The notice doesn't stay in a kid's personal file. It's simply to alert staff to handle that child with care. So students who experience a traumatic event are more likely to face academic and emotional challenges, and we are going to figure out a way to support them so they can succeed. Next slide, please. I think this slide is very important. I just did this presentation here and I told the people in the audience, take a picture of this. This is very important. There are 3 parts to Handle with Care. A lot of people hear Handle with Care and all they think is a notice. They don't understand that that's one part of a 3-part process. It's never okay to identify a child without being prepared to help them, to intervene, to give them what they need, to meet them where they are. So Handle with Care is 3 parts. The first is the first responder encountering kids at the scene. We'll send a confidential notice over to the school, and everyone does it differently. That's because every county and community has strengths and weaknesses that are different. But that confidential notice with only the child's name, age, and school is going over to the school, hopefully before the start of the next school day. The second part is schools. Schools prep trauma-sensitive supports for these kids. How's that done? All school staff. I'm just not just talking teachers. I'm talking teacher's aide, so any school staff, custodians, bus drivers, lunch ladies, they're going to learn what is trauma, what it looks like, what it does to a child's developing brain, what it looks like in the classroom, and what they can do to mitigate those negative effects, and what they should never do with a child having a meltdown in the classroom because they've been triggered from a traumatic event. The third part of our program is that mental health providers partner for on-site therapy as needed. When we first started this program, we wanted accessible mental health services. And I told my friend Tracy, that'll never happen. No parent is going to let their children come to school and talk to a therapist. And she said, you are so wrong. Even parents that might not be the best parents want what's best for their kids. And if those services are available, they will have access. They will access them. And she was absolutely right. So with parental permission, we want mental health, we want children to have access to mental health services, period, with parental permission. So those are the 3 parts to Handle with Care. Next slide, please. When we first started Handle with Care, I didn't realize this, but when we were approaching first responders and law enforcement and asking them to participate, nobody wants to be asked to do one more thing. Our plates are all busy, we're all full, but here we are asking them to do one more thing, but we never conveyed the message that it's not a big thing to do. All we want is if children are present, yes or no, if yes, name, age, and school. So we want first responders to send the notice to enable the child's school to handle the child with care upon their arrival to the school. So that's the main part of this, is just the first responders identify the child and the school handles that child with care, and the mental health providers provide more services if needed. Next slide. So with that, I want to turn it back to you and Captain Bigeman. Lindsay.
Yes, I am excited to introduce our next speaker, Captain Brigham. early in my transition into this role, I had the opportunity to connect with him, and his support for Handle with Care. The Handle with Care program was really evident right from the start. Captain Brigham has been a strong advocate and a champion for Handle with Care, and his commitment to ensuring children receive the support they need is truly inspiring. It's my honor to welcome him and invite him to share more with you all today, and I'll turn it over to you, Captain Brigham.
Thank you, Lindsay. I see a few familiar faces out of the 170 or 75. So for those that I see, one of them I went to the academy with many years ago, like 18 years ago out of Dickinson PD. So this is kind of exciting. But as mentioned from Lindsay, my name's Tim Brigham. I've worked with the Sheriff's Office since 2004 and been on patrol the last 18 years. Just kind of a back history. We're very fortunate in Cass County. I've seen a couple text messages as far as how the notifications and all that stuff are made. We have 5 school resource deputies that service the needs of 5 of our rural school districts, as well as the city of Fargo, the city of West Fargo. So we have a lot of cops inside our schools in the Fargo area. So it's fairly simple, obviously, to make these notifications. As mentioned, we've had our SRDs in schools since 2008, which is when I hit the street. We used to do stuff very informally, like, hey, I stopped Billy or Johnny for speeding, or if you remembered, hey, by the way, we were at Billy or Johnny's house last night at 2 in the morning and we yanked Dad out of his castle and Johnny saw it all. So our intent was always there to notify. At the time, we just had 2 school resource deputies, but clearly, kind of as Andrea mentioned, we have 18,000 other things on our plate and it was an oversight. So I don't know how it came about, but in 2018, a gal by the name of Jennifer that worked for the state had reached out and just mentioned this Handle with Care and the ease of it. And to me, it was an absolute no-brainer. Just because I felt we were already doing it. It's a communication piece. It's something we're already doing to a very informal and sometimes a less extent. And this was just going to formalize it, not from a red tape bureaucratic standpoint, but it was going to put it on the forefront. And we brought Jennifer in and trained all our patrol staff at the time. And then anybody that we've brought into our patrol settings since then gets exposed to it. And again, it's a very, very simple notification. I always ask for simply on the subject line, it says HWC, and then there potentially is a name in the email. And they send it to myself and the school resource deputy. And, we have a lot of kids who live in rural settings that still attend Fargo and West Fargo, and we have our point of contact with them. And obviously people extremely appreciative of it. Your next bullet, Lindsay, as far as why notifications matters, because it's all about the kids. I often think about, some of the discipline I received in elementary school I deserved. But I just sitting back and closing your eyes and thinking if some kid was to get punished or a teacher who's a human being but yet gets frustrated, unbeknownst to them, we rip their mom or dad out of the house at 3 in the morning. They're involved in a car accident. It's wonderful to have that full, that full picture of the student that these teachers and administrators get. And Lindsay, I kind of shared it with you today, but I reached out. And if anyone ever got questioned, reach out to Jenna Farkas at Mapleton Elementary because she is very, very fond. She's a superintendent there and very fond of the program. And I reached out to her today just to touch base with her because I know her fondness of it. And she would go kicking and screaming if we were to not enact this program. And she had just mentioned just this full picture of every learner, if they're starting to act out, possibly the wise, if they're starting to disengage the wise. She shared a situation where we had a Handle with Care notification 2 days ago because one of the little learner's family dog got put down. So mom and dad reached out to our SRO and said, just so you know, we put down the dog. Billy's really sad. Nonetheless, it's a very, very simple notification to the building leader, counselor, and happy day. We had a very critical incident in Horace last week that involved the shooting victim. And unfortunately, it was right around that time for kids to go to school. And we had 2 learners enter the hallway, unbeknownst to them what was in the hallway at the time, which prompted me to get a hold of West Fargo Public Schools so they could reach out to these kids to check in. So it's something that takes no time, extremely, extremely simple, but the benefits, you can't put into words the benefit of what this program can do for them. As far as the next part of it, the partnerships with the schools, I don't know if this will upset anybody, but I was completely unwilling to go through the bureaucratic red tape of getting a hold of an MOU put in place and you must do and you must do, you must do. We don't violate the juvenile protection side of it. Sometimes our patrol staff will write a second dissertation, and I have our school resource deputies really pare it down. As I mentioned, it could be something as simple as I stopped, little Johnny's dad for a speeding ticket, and all that's going to require is one of my SRDs to walk down the hall and possibly high five Johnny. To something that's far more serious, as I mentioned, where we're taking mom or dad out of the house at 3 a.m, or an unattended death, anything of that nature. Where then at that point we make sure that the building lead, as well as the counselors involved, but we don't cross that threshold of confidentiality because that's not what it's about. As Andrea has mentioned, it's simply about handling that little learner with care, knowing full well that they were exposed to something potentially horrific, or at least an exposure to law enforcement. And real world impacts, I mean, I think I am so unbelievably proud of the numbers that our office has provided to the state when they've reached out. I even pushed our program. I've had the opportunity to supervise our school resource deputies for over a decade. And it comes from their passion far more than my passion. But this doesn't stop, May 21st when school gets out and start back up, October 20th and school gets back into play. They have their identified learners that they want to check in with, but also we do handle with care through the summertime months. If they don't know where a kid lands, and they simply send it to the sergeant, the 5 SRDs, and myself, and we just push it out. And our SRDs will work patrol capacity at some point throughout the summer months, and we still check in with our learners throughout the summertime months, because obviously with a lack of resources they may have that Monday through Friday, if mom and dad are out of the house working, we still want a cop to reach out to them and let them know we're thinking about them, and hopefully have that impact that day and that month, and then when they get back into school. So we are tremendous champions of this program. I know some of these names I visited with throughout the state that have been interested in it, and there was always that bureaucratic side of it. And I just say it's simply an email and a notification. I'm not going to tie myself up and have a kid lose out because we already are protecting the confidentiality side of things. So with that, I don't have anything else to add other than Lindsay and Andrea, thank you for letting me share our story about our agency and our side of the state.
Thank you, Captain Brigham, and that was wonderful. It's nice to learn from you, and thank you for sharing. I get to talk about the next exciting and important thing, which is the notifications that those first responders are sending over. So we're going to spend just a minute talking a little bit more about that, although Andrea and Captain Brigham have shared some of this already, but we're going to talk about that notice. So it's very simple. Again, it's only 3 words: handle with care. And it's very intentional. And I don't mean to be repetitive, but no additional details about the incident are ever shared. And the purpose is why this is because if you understand trauma, you know that you don't need the specifics to respond with support, care, and compassion. The notice should arrive at the school at the start of the next school day. And that timing is really important. It gives staff a chance to prepare before the child walks in and walks through those doors. And Captain Brigham even talked about the summer notifications and sending those over and why that's important too. It's strictly a need to know basis at the school. It doesn't go in the child's file or in their permanent record. We want to protect their privacy. If possible, notices can also include childcare serving organizations and agencies as well, so that support extends beyond the classroom. And here's a critical point that I think we need to talk about too, is that handle with care does not mean that school personnel approach the child about what happened or ask questions about what happened. Their role is to create safe, supportive environments, not to ask more questions or find out what happened. The key takeaway as we wrap up notifications is 3 words can change a child's day and their future. So we talked about the role of first responders in handle with care. Now we're going to shift to the next, I just say element, or the next part of implementation, which is our schools and how they can prepare trauma sensitive support for kiddos. I think this slide I really like. I think it captures the heart of the Handle with Care initiative. Schools that participate in Handle with Care are aware, alert, and they're prepared because they receive that timely notification that helps them support students right away. By receiving a notification, teachers and staff become silent observers, attentive to trauma symptoms a child may show, and ready to offer trauma-sensitive supports if needed. When schools respond with that calm and that care, rather than because we didn't know, discipline or being more punitive, the impact of trauma can be minimized. And as a result, schools typically see fewer disciplinary actions, reduced absenteeism, and stronger student resilience and confidence, which is what we all want. Now we're going to talk about a vital piece of this, which is training for schools. Handle with Care works best when everyone understands that it's not just about sending a message or just sending a notification. It's about changing how we respond to kiddos. The notification is one of the steps, but if staff don't have trauma training, they may still default to different or formerly used measures, like detentions, missed recesses, things like that, which kind of, I guess, would undermine the whole purpose of Handle with Care. Trauma training equips educators and staff with practical strategies, how to recognize signs of stress, how to offer flexibility, how to create a safe environment for learning. And without having that mindset, Handle with Care may just become a checkbox, like this is just something we do because we have to. And when we embrace that mindset, every interaction becomes an opportunity for healing instead of further harm. I love these slides. So I've had the opportunity to do more and more sessions on Handle with Care. I meet with more districts, and I really love this. Looking at what happens when schools maybe don't have that context about what the child has gone through the night before. This may be a typical day for a student who's experienced trauma the night before for any of the reasons we've talked about. You can read those incidents, like what's happening in the responses in red, but none of these actions address the root cause. The child's already hurting, and now there may be another source of stress. And this is not, and I think Andrea said this too, this is not about anyone being like a bad teacher or a bad educator, but that's not what this is about at all. It's just about missing information. Because we don't know, we don't get that information. And without that heads up, staff respond based on the behavior alone. And I like this, so looking at this comparison and then looking at when we do more model Handle with Care, the same child coming to school, but that teacher having that simple heads up Handle with Care, the responses might change and they might look a little bit different. And you can see those same situations and how the response shifts in green. And I know we've talked about this, but Handle with Care doesn't require big budgets or complex systems, which is what's beautiful about it. It's a partnership between first responders, schools, mental health providers to make sure kids feel safe and supported. Simple heads up changes everything. Next, we wrapped up the school element very briefly, I know, but we're going to talk quickly about the final element or the final piece of Handle with Care, which is our mental health partners. Schools do an incredible job of providing that immediate support, but some children may need more adjustments than what we can just provide, and maybe they need more like therapeutic care. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Andrea, just to share a little bit more about this piece of Handle with Care.
Okay, thank you. When we created Handle with Care, we met monthly for a year looking at all the different components for this. And when we thought about the mental health component, our key word was accessible. Some of these children can be helped with simple things, but some of these children are going to need mental health services. And our key to this is we wanted them accessible. So when we created this, we wanted schools to give free space to a mental health professional to set up and offer those services at school, and for schools to give that space for free. Why did we want that? Well, we were in West Virginia and we had a lot of issues. One thing is transportation to and from mental health, an office. Public transportation sometimes ends at 6 o'clock and there's no transportation. Some parents are working 2 to 3 jobs just to pay bills, keep the lights on in the house, and they don't have time to get off work from those to take those kids to appointments. In some households, the appointments for the children are not the priority, and so they often don't happen. So we wanted to just not go anywhere near all that, and we wanted to have services on site. That is not always the case. So as Handle with Care is involved, it is involved that we want accessible mental health services. Whatever that looks like to you, we need to make them accessible so their kids aren't dependent on trying to figure out a ride to that appointment and back from the appointment. So it might look like services on site at the school. It might look like telehealth. It might look like a local agency that offers transportation to and from the office. Whatever it is, it's got to be accessible, and that's the key word in this. And a lot of kids really need access to mental health services. Handle with Care has become a prime component to safe schools across the country. And it is the first line of defense, is taking the temperature, the emotional temperature of those kids at that school. And that's what's going to keep those children safe and the school at large safe. So children who need services must have access to services.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you for sharing that and adding more and elaborating on that. So the next slide, I feel like I could say this a lot, but I like this slide a lot too. Before Handle with Care, children exposed to trauma were often only identified if the situation met like Child Protective Services reporting criteria. And I've actually heard that from some first responders or law enforcement officers. And many children experiencing traumatic events went unnoticed or unsupported, which meant that schools had no idea, no way to respond appropriately. And that lack of communication left educators unaware of what the child had gone through, making it harder to provide the care and flexibility that those kiddos needed. But then you start to look at when you have that Handle with Care intervention, those first responders are alerting the school when a child is present. The schools receive a confidential notice before the next school day, giving staff, again, time to prepare with trauma-informed support. And this simple notification without sharing those details empowers schools to offer compassion and stability when a child needs it most. So this shift from before Handle with Care and then after implementing Handle with Care ensures that children are no longer invisible in their trauma. It creates a safety net where first responders and schools work together to protect and support children. So what's happening in North Dakota? Just a quick snapshot of where we're at. This is tricky for me. So since starting in July, because I'm still newer to the role, I've been working to identify partners, learn which communities are implementing Handle with Care, and figure out how I can best support current efforts. If you're on this call and you're implementing Handle with Care and we haven't connected, it's not intentional, but I would really love to connect with you and talk more with you about implementation. Within our agency, we have had several transitions. And so, catching up, figuring out where we're at with Handle with Care and kind of getting a scope of what that looks like in North Dakota. One of the things that I'm excited about is that over 118 schools are implementing Handle with Care across our state. I know Captain Brigham shared some. Also, other communities include Dickinson, Wahpeton, Mandan, Grand Forks, Williston, to name a few. So what role do we play in this? We are here to, FFND specifically, we're here to provide resources and support. You can see some of the resources that we have available, from like a readiness checklist, frequently asked questions, a model of fidelity for how we want to move forward in the state of North Dakota. So again, please reach out for any support that you are needing with implementing Handle with Care. But more than that, more than the resources and the support that we provide, I'm asking you to just take action, because every day a child experiences trauma without support is a day that can change the trajectory of their life. And let's not wait. If your community isn't implementing Handle with Care yet and you want to get started, I'm here and I'm happy to have the conversation. So speaking of red tape, Captain Brigham, I know you said that. Yeah, cover your eyes. And so I do want to talk about fidelity. I'm not talking about MOUs and all of that, I promise. But I have had communities where I've now, connected with, and it's like, oh, we already do this. We're informally doing it. We figured it out, So I want to add a little bit about that. And I know it can feel tempting to move forward informally, especially when everyone wants to start, like you want to get going with it. And I think that instinct comes from a good place, but informal approaches often create unintended consequences. leading to inconsistencies in those notifications. It could be oversharing of sensitive information. Sorry, I'm letting people in too, so I get a little distracted. And worst of all, potentially having children kind of fall through the cracks because there was no clear process or formal system in place. But that formal implementation ensures fidelity to the handle with care model. It protects privacy and it creates consistency across systems. That means every child getting the same level of care, support, no matter what school or agency is involved. But every community is unique and how they structure it is really up to those key partners. Why formal implementation is critical to us at Families Flourish, because it allows us to track progress and provide meaningful support across the state. We collect notification data quarterly. I think Captain Brigham spoke about that from our partner communities, and regularly check in on what resources they may need. This data shows us what's working, it highlights gaps, and it guides improvements across the state. And it also serves as powerful evidence to demonstrate the impact of Handle with Care, advocate for its expansion across North Dakota so that more children across our state receive the care that they deserve. Fidelity is not about red tape. It's about safety, consistency, and making sure that no child's forgotten. I'm not talking MOUs and all of that. It's just us helping to get the ball rolling. And we went really quick. I was surprised. I kind of thought that we were going to end up going over, but this will allow us some time to maybe have some conversation and ask some questions, especially since we have these great speakers on today. So maybe I'll just open it up for questions. Allison, I know you're monitoring the chat box. Has anything come through that anyone would like to ask or have a conversation on?
I think the only thing I'm seeing is how do you recommend sending a notification to the school? And what I'm thinking is like, is there a template? Do you have, what does that look like? That's the only thing I'm seeing in the comments right now.
From what I've learned, and I'll let Andrea and Captain Brigham join and share too. But from what I've learned is that every community has a different way to send the notifications, whether it's through dispatch, we have forms, they might have an email that they use. Every community is unique, and that's where it gets like the community, the stakeholders involved get to determine what that notification process looks like and what works for them. Andrea or Captain Brigham, do you have anything to add to that? You got thumbs up. I'll take it.
I'll add something to that. When we started out in a pilot, we used an email and followed by text. And you always have to remember the busiest time at school is the first thing in the morning. And if you're emailing the principal at that school, that's the busiest time, and they might not see that for an hour or so. So when we started it, they started it with an email followed by a text, and the school and the Charleston Police Department came up with that on their own. And so since then, all kinds of people do it all kinds of different ways, and there is no wrong way. The community is the people that has to decide how they want to send it. They know what works best in their community. They know who their champions are, who they can count on. They know what flows, communication flows will work. So every county or community that does it, and I know it makes it confusing for everybody else, but it has to work for the community that it's serving. And I'll give you for instance, San Diego, California, 10th largest school district in the country is doing it, and they are doing it so well. And they created a very, very secure app where they're sending those notifications, and the information, the children's name drops off the app, after the thing is sent over. It has to be very secure and not stay in any sort of database. But everybody does it differently, and it's a little confusing, but it has to be on that way because the community has to decide how they want to do it, and they know what works for them.
Thank you.
Lindsay, I'll just share real quick. Like with our agency, I simply asked that it says HWC in the subject line, and then the ICR number. And our SRDs, and many of them are on this the meeting right now. But there are times that patrol writes a little bit of a dissertation, and that's the last thing I want patrol to do is to be irritated with something that's so important. So I simply say put HWC in the subject line. And the ICR number, and then our SRDs get to the school before the buses show up. But it's going to be their responsibility to just look up the run and see what kid might be involved. Now, obviously, depending on the time of day, they might get phone calls or texts, but we've been doing this for 6 years. And outside of them just getting really irritated if there is an oversight, because we're all human beings, I feel we've been very successful with just a nice simple email.
Great, thank you.
Lindsay, can I also add that lots of people have been using QR codes, and officers love the QR codes. And the QR, they just simply take out their phone, take a picture of the QR code, and that opens up an email that goes directly to the contacts it's supposed to go to. And like you said, it's just the subject line is handled with care and name, age, and school. But those QR codes, they're making stickers and they're putting them on their computers or around their cars. So they always have that QR code just to pull up, and they don't have to stop and try to figure out where it's supposed to go.
Thank you. Allison, was there something else? I saw you on mute.
Yeah, there's a couple. There's one that I think would be really helpful for you guys. How would you suggest starting up an HWC program at schools?
Well, I would love to help get the program up and running. I would say starting conversations with those stakeholders and sharing this session with them and sharing more information with them. And then I can help get the ball rolling. No red tape, just gonna help you get it going and get the program up and running, and then just be there to support. I know that someone just mentioned stickers, Andrea. So we can provide different little resources too. I know I just sent a whole, oh, look at there, Captain Briggerman has it too. But I just sent a whole bunch to Wapaton, another program that recently started implementing, because the officer wanted it for his officers to have on their whatever in their car, on their phone, what a computer, just to remind them to send those hand with care notifications. So we do have different resources and supports that we can help get to every community across the state implementing as well.
Lindsay, can I add something, please?
Of course, always, yeah.
If you want to start a handle with care notice in your community, what I would do from the school system perspective is, if you know the superintendent, go have a conversation with that superintendent. If you don't know her, find someone that does know him or her and go sit down and meet with them and lay out handle with care and explain what it is and why you think it would be important. I would also do the same thing with your local chief of police and your sheriff, but I would take one of their own with you. Police and first responders operate and communicate and respond and train and all that much differently from other disciplines. And so take one of them with you. A lot of times, and I've seen this mistake, is someone says, I want to start a handle with care program, and they march into someone's office and say, I want to do this, and this is what it is. And you do this, but you don't understand what you're asking someone to do something, and they know nothing about you and you know nothing about them. You have to have common language. You have to have common, oh, help me, Lindsay, what do I want to say? I always say, if you're going to talk to law enforcement, take one of them with you, because that's going to help you a lot with credibility. No one wants to be told what to do, and no one wants to do one more thing. So you have to explain it in a way that you can communicate it well with respect, and they understand what you're trying to do. Captain Briggerman, can you help me say that better?
I would agree, and that's the number one thing that cops hate is change. But it's 2025, it's not 1995, and I would say every cop in America, or at least I'd like to hope the good ones, we have a far different passion for trying to do the right thing at times that we think might help us out in the future. And I've mentioned again, we love it. We've done it for 6 or 7 years, and we will continue to do it on a non-bureaucratic, red tape, very formal basis. But yeah, anytime that anyone's trying to sell us a product, you get much further along with us in law enforcement field if you're a former cop. I mean, it is what it is. So, and I would be happy at any time if somebody reached out to Lindsay and wanted to get a hold of me to again hear some of our successes, or I'll actually give you to some of the subject matter experts, and that's our people that work in our schools. They will 100% hold conversations or email communication with anybody if you have questions, because we're very fortunate here, and I know the former superintendent at Northern Cass is now at Fargo Public, and West Fargo is part of it, and us. So there's a lot of notifications that go around this part of the state.
Follow up on that, Captain. There was a question about whether you can speak more to the communication process for school districts understanding when multiple LEAs are involved.
When I'm assuming that's law enforcement agencies. So
Yes.
we have, I will say like every 4, 6, 8 months, we'll push something out to patrol as a reminder, but I'm included on every single handle with care just for statistic purposes. So we have a lot of people that live in, rural West Fargo, but go to West Fargo public schools, or they live on the south part of Fargo, but they attend Fargo public, because Kinder's too far of a drive. So if we deal with a kid in our rural setting, but they go to either West Fargo or Fargo Public, I will get the email, or our patrol staff's intelligent enough that we have the point of contact. It's Sergeant Nick Chunnis with Fargo Police Department and Pat Hansen with the West Fargo Police Department. We push that notification to them because we don't know every cop that works in every school. Maybe my peoples do. But then they just simply, and I know we had that one I had mentioned about last week. I pushed that to him at probably 7:30 or 8 that night over in West Fargo. He had already shared that with the school resource officer. They got it first thing in the morning, and they were able to go and hold that conversation with those little learners. So we have established point of contacts with 2 of the PDs. We don't send anything to the school districts because sometimes cops have garbage in the mouth. And the last thing I want to put in there is 3 or 4 different juvenile names. And maybe the school counselor doesn't need to see that, or doesn't have privilege to see that, or the superintendent, whoever it may be. So our SODs will vet through that, and they'll just say little Johnny or Jane Smith, handle with care. And they don't get their, I mean, there's a lot of public record stuff that could come out. I think we'd be protected. But when it comes to protecting the juvenile side of it, we only send it to cops, so cops vet it and they know what they're sharing that's not going to cross that line of confidentiality.
Thank you. Allison, was there anything else?
I have a couple. There was a question on whether like a treatment center that what I'm reading is it looks like they serve school age children. Would they be able to send a handle with care notification to schools?
I'll answer that. What I tell everybody is if you're interested in sending a handle with care notice, you need to look at your company's policies. You need to look at the credentialing agency that credentials your discipline and your license, and things like that. It's you've got to remember law enforcement can send it because their reports are open records, right? They're open records, so there's no problem with them sending it. But think about hospitals. Hospital staff can't send them. It would violate HIPAA. There's so many things that it would violate. So you've really got to look at your who credentials you, look at the policies where you work, look at the laws where you live to figure that out. But Child Protective Services cannot send a handle with care notice. CAC cannot send a handle with care notice. Law enforcement is often involved with CAC. They can send a handle with care notice.
Thank you, Andrea.
Does that answer your question?
I think it did, yeah.
Okay.
Finally, I've got one more here that says, is there a way that foster parents can check to see if the school has received a handle with care notification when they're aware of something happening?
I don't think the school can let anyone know. That would be a FERPA violation, wouldn't it? I'm guessing. I'm not an expert on that. But any information about that student going out of the school would violate FERPA.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I know foster care parents really want that information. I just want to acknowledge, I know foster care parents don't get a whole lot of information that if they had would be super helpful to them. And I get that, and I don't have an answer for that.
Well, we're wrapping up just a few minutes early. Again, thank you to Captain Brigham. Thank you, Andrea Dar, for sharing your expertise with us today, sharing those real life scenarios, and just so thankful for all the people that tuned in. We had over, I think it was 176 people that tuned in today, and this recording will be available. So please reach out if you'd like access to it. We'll definitely get it on our YouTube channel as well, so it can be shared with any partners or stakeholders as well. So if there's nothing else.